We are going to talk about a book. You might have figured that out. But we're really going to talk about the lessons in the book. Before we get into that, we'll tell you a little bit who we are, so it makes sense why we're talking about this book at Microsoft. So I'm that lady. I'm JoAnn. I'm one of the co-authors of this book. I've also, for the last 5 years, been leading the Datacenter of the Future program at Microsoft. So it's my job to think 5, 10, 15 years out and design what we need to land then. So I work with a lot of different people inside of Microsoft to make that happen, but I also have to bring in innovation partners to gap fill our skills and just help us accelerate the process, and that's where Taryn fits in.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Taryn. I represent a company called TwistThink. TwistThink's a product innovation firm, and essentially we help people figure out what deserves to be built, and then we help them build it. So we partnered with JoAnn and her team on her project, Datacenters of the Future, and you'll hear a little bit more about that as we go through our presentation today.
Cool. So the book is something, the other person on this poster, his name's Dean. He's 20 years at the company. He runs our responsible AI program. He's one of the leaders of it. And he works for our chief scientific officer. So bigwig, not bigwig. But we became friends maybe my first year in the company, and we started I'm like total entrepreneur. I'm at Microsoft by the weirdest of circumstances, never would have put myself there. But here's this guy who's been there for 20 years, and this chick who's been there for a year, and we're trading innovation war stories, and they're basically the same. And we're like, well, that's interesting. And then I'm also new to the company and I want to be successful. So I'm like, I'd really like to know how innovation happens at Microsoft. Is it any different than what I would do running my own company? So that all just snowballed, and a bunch of, 2 book nerds get together and we're like, let's go interview people and let's write a book about it. And we at first really just thought we were writing a book for people at Microsoft, like give it out to all the new employees. Here's what you need to know to be successful in innovation here. But then we were like, we figured out that there were all of these patterns and these overlaps in the different scenarios, and we're like, man, this is really just like innovation truth. There are fundamental truths to innovation, and if we can share this with people, everybody has the opportunity to learn them, apply them, and maybe it helps people innovate faster or with less risk, with less costs, bring on board your people. So that's why we decided to print it as a book. And, we're Microsoft. We're not, we're doing pretty well, right? Company's doing all right. We know a thing or two about innovation over the last 50 years. And so we're donating all the proceeds to STEM charities. So not up here hawking my goods or anything. You're supporting STEM, and you can pre-order the book, and I'll be over there later giving out some swag and chit-chatting. So that's like the context for what we're going to talk about.
To validate some of that is JoAnn took a very focused look inside at Microsoft and recognized patterns and started connecting dots. And then when the thought came, hey, maybe this applies outside of Microsoft, she called us up and said, hey, TwistThink and other partners in our network, your job is to work with different companies every single day, right? You're seeing companies from tons of different industries, different sizes. What do you think about these patterns? Do these seem in line with you? Can you validate them? And it was a resounding yes. So just to validate, it started in Microsoft, went outside of Microsoft, applies to all of us every day, and we'll talk through that.
And one other note, one of her great designers did all the graphics in there for free, because they're good people.
All right, let's get into the good stuff.
Let's get into the good stuff.
Okay, so the first question, JoAnn.
Yes.
When you think about innovation, what comes to your mind?
And I may have known this question was coming, so I have my little cheat sheet. And only because you see the name up there, Diesel. Diesel engines, the whole concept was created by a man, not shockingly, named Diesel. So Rudolf Diesel in 1913 wrote a letter to the German Patent Office, basically petitioning them to stop giving patents to people with ideas. He was making the case that the real value happens when you bring it into reality, when you make it an innovation. So he has this beautiful quote. He's like, there's 3 stages. There's ideas, fun, happy, creative, drink a beer, pontificate. There are inventions, also if you're an inventor, fun, happy, I'm in my lab, I'm blowing stuff up, I'm having a good time. Then there's innovation. And I have to do it justice by reading his exact description of what that is. The introduction is a time of struggle against stupidity and envy, apathy and evil, secret opposition and open conflict of interests, the horrible period of struggle with man, a martyrdom, even if success ensues. I don't remember when I found this quote, but I was like, you see me? Like, if you've invented anything and tried to bring it into market, you know this quote. So when somebody asks me, what do you think about when you think about innovation? I think happy, persistence and grit and all of that other stuff.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot that 90% of innovations fail not in the idea, but in the execution of the idea. Because it's freaking hard, and you run up against roadblocks, and you have doubters, and you have skeptics, and you have all the noise that you don't have when you're in the happy little bubble, and it's at an idea phase, and everything's sexy, and everything's great, and it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. You don't have all the critics because you're in your head, or you're with your partner who you get it. And so I think that 90% in the execution and the different stages of innovation are so impactful, and you have to see all 3 of them.
Yeah. So a lot of what comes out in the book is that we talk about going from nothing to something to scale. And when we step back from the case studies that we wrote about the different products and businesses throughout Microsoft, we're like, so much of this book is about execution. But there were so many things they did in the ideation and invention stages that set them up for successful execution. So we're going to talk a little more about that.
Yep.
There's another word we want to just frame. Taryn, tell us about VUCA and what is that in innovation?
So VUCA is actually a leadership framework in which people try to describe the dynamics in which we all have to work through every day. So V stands for volatility, U stands for uncertainty, C stands for complexity, and A stands for ambiguity. And it was these 2 philosophers just trying to describe, this is why getting shit done is so hard. And then you couple that with everything else going on in the world today, with the rise of technology, with the political tensions we all see and feel, the dynamics that COVID, the residual effects of COVID, and innovating in an already VUCA world is that much harder, but also that much more rewarding. So when I think about innovation, I think about VUCA and more the opportunity that we have to kind of break through some of those parameters and dynamics that we're all navigating today for the good of all of us.
This is very tiny, so we'll call it out. There are 7 case studies in the book that go back, some of them we didn't quite go back the full 50 years of Microsoft. I think the longest one is 35 years ago. So half of the book is written in storytelling. The other half of the book, we looked across the 7 and we teased out 4 patterns. And they can be stated as, how do you innovate every day, over the years, with everyone, and more than technology? So that's what we're going to go through, given some examples. There's about 50 practices, frameworks, lessons learned in this book of about 230 pages. We wrote it kind of to be something, you just keep it on your desk, you can highlight it, write it, dog ear it, try some stuff, like a nice, if you I'll put it this way. I have read basically every decent book on innovation written by academics and consultants because I'm that person. So you could go read all those, or you could read this one and then go find the ones we reference to read more about any one thing. But we just felt like, let's shortcut this for everybody, bring it into one thing, and then put it in the context of an undeniably successful business. So nobody can be like, well, you just got lucky. It's like 50 years, multiple reinventions across the whole company, and there's only been 3 CEOs, so it's not like there's been this constant change of culture. It's been pretty consistent.
So the case studies in the book cover things like Xbox and Outlook and Copilot, and they talk about how those teams individually at Microsoft innovated to stay ahead. This is a case study we're going to share that's not in the book. So DOTF, Data Center of the Future, is the case study that we're going to walk through and ask JoAnn how she led a team to reimagine what the future of data centers could look like. And you'll see how those 4 patterns emerged, how she used them to her advantage to ultimately create the data center of the future, which you'll all get a preview of right now.
All right. Do we all know what a data center is, what it's for? Any context? Anybody not? Anybody need me to like, okay, I figured. It's a tech conference, just checking. This is one of ours. This is our North Holland data center in the Netherlands. It's pretty big. You can kind of get scale from the cars on the road and whatnot. That's about 300 acres of land and concrete and metal and then water and power and people and all of that, right? Super important. Like, we literally wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now if we didn't have that. But they've basically looked like that since we started building them, which is about 20 years ago now. Now, don't tell my data center engineers I said that, because they'll be like, no, it's totally like the rack changed and all. Inside the walls, all kinds of magic is happening. That has evolved a lot. But the actual infrastructure of the building and the power systems and the cooling, that's what I work on. I don't work on the computers themselves. I work on buildings and power and water and other utilities. So what my team did was to stop and say, now that we know what we know, and we've done what we've done, what does the data center need to be? And what do we build that 15 years from now will still support what we're doing? So you're some of the first people to see this. It is public. You can Google it. You can Bing it. But I can't tell you a lot about the magic, unfortunately. That's not public, so I can only tell you certain things. I welcome questions, and I'll tell you what I can. But hopefully, at a minimum, from the picture that is public, you can get a sense of scale, and you can get a sense of aesthetic, but the aesthetic is actually functional. So we used a practice called regenerative design to come up with this. We baked in all the other business and technical goodies, but we were like, we're in a climate crisis, we're in water scarcity, we've got severe weather, we need things that are gonna be able to be flooded and be droughts, and like, can we make it waterless? Can we make it green energy powered? Can we make it circular power, where basically a data center is a giant hairdryer. Power goes in, heat and data come out. How do we use that, right? So we just looked at all of these system inputs and outputs, and this is not where we started. In 3 months, we did discovery work. In 3 months, we did ideation work. We came up with about 140 different ideas. And then as we developed it, this came out about 6 months later. So it was about 1 year from blank sheet of paper, from nothing to something.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit deeper. Let's talk about how those 4 patterns that we introduced at the start of this talk actually played out over the course of that year where we went from nothing to something.
Yeah.
So the first one,
All right.
innovating every day.
So again, there's like 50 things in the book. I'm going to pull out one. There is this, I don't know, a lot of you are probably in the startup world, and so you're creatives and you're innovative. And I'm going to say, I don't think any of you do this, but I've met my fair share of innovators who think it's magic and serendipitous. And I don't know, I was sitting in my bathtub and all of a sudden I figured it out. And then I made it and it became a unicorn.
Lightning bolt.
Yes.
Magic.
Yes, in the bathtub.
Yeah.
But what you find across all the success stories of Microsoft and what you find missing in the failures at Microsoft, because we talk about both, is just like operations has standard operating procedures, so does innovation. And the reason that that's so important, especially as you grow beyond like a dinner party or 2 pizzas, you know, that quote from, I think it's Bezos, 2 pizzas to feed your team. As you bring more people on, if they've got to figure out how stuff gets done, they're not going to get stuff done, right? So the more that it's a process that people can learn, they can get better at it. They can repeat it. You can scale it. So innovation to go from nothing to something to scale has a process.
Yeah, that's great. And real quick, JoAnn just made a comment that maybe many of you are startups. So let's just do a quick poll. How many in the audience are startups or founders of startups?
Not that many.
Right. How many are in corporate or corporate innovation?
Oh.
Right. What about innovation agencies? Great. Other? Any other? Okay. Good. It's good to get a sense of who we're chatting to. Pretty evenly split crowd, which is great.
Nice.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Innovating over time. So you have this concept of it has to be every day and it has to be over time. So explain those two, explain what that means, and explain how you use that to your advantage building Datacenter.
Okay. So if I'm building, and I've built software, hardware, buildings with software and hardware, I've done all of it. It took us a year to go from nothing to something, right? Just to get to the something. Now it's going to take a long time to get it out into the world at scale, right? It's a big, complex system. Even if we made it smaller, it's still big. So how do we innovate year after year? How do we make that a continuous adaptive cycle of innovation? That's one of the hardest struggles in corporate innovation, right? Like stopping and starting with management coming and going and economic ups and downs and budget freezes, and right? So taking that daily process and combining it with a portfolio view and a life cycle view of innovation, you can start creating a pipeline through your business. And it'll connect to pattern 3, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Well, I'll just sprinkle in.
Yeah,
I think it's a bit of analogy of muscle building, right? Anatomy.
Yes.
So you have to lift weights every day, but it's over time where you see the impacts. And so the two have to go hand in hand, where if all you did was, you know, lift every other day or here and there, it really doesn't become a part of who you are. And the same applies. It doesn't become a part of your organization's DNA. It doesn't enable you to really scale and to grow because it's not part of your anatomy.
My brain stuck there for a second. I'm like,
I got you.
There was something. So these hackathons, we do one, I think it's actually this week. Open innovation days, just, you know, show up, shoot your ideas out into the world. You know, those things are great morale builders, but you can't build an innovation pipeline on those things.
They're the sexy in the Diesel quote, right? They're the fun.
Yeah, it really is. You have to stack that everyday practice. But here's the flip side. When you are innovating every day and you do have that in your culture, you end up with a lot of ideas, and you got to know what to do with them.
Yep. I think as JoAnn transitions here, it's easy to say to innovate every day. Okay, it's easy to get in that mindset, but it's what we mean by that is there's tools and there's practices and there's behaviors and there's mindsets that enables an organization to innovate every day. And so we want to share one of the tools that JoAnn and her team use to help with decision making when you're going through an innovation process, because by nature, ideas, and what if we did this, and how might we do this, and what would it look like if, and quickly you get into that divergence space. And if you stay there forever, you're just gonna keep going and going and going. The real magic is in the convergence.
Yeah.
And this is a tool that you can take that helps you start innovating every day. It's a tool you can implement in your organization to drive behavior change, to drive common language and understanding and perspective when you're in some of that ideation and need to go down to convergence.
Yep. So this is the actual decision matrix I use in my team. We set a mission, right? Data center of the future. We define guiding principles of what we wanted that thing to achieve: business, environment, scale, cost, all those things. And then we created a decision matrix. These, by the way, I stole part of this from DARPA. So legit innovators, it's good to steal from them. They have something called the hard test, or they did at one point, and if you look up the DARPA hard test, some of this language will be very familiar. But we adapted it and added to it and made it ours. So now, when we got to that point that we had 140 ideas, we put them through this. And we did it throughout as well, but it helped us to combine and refine and throw things out and stretch things forward. It just got us out of being purely emotion-driven, gut-driven, oh, I think we should do that, that looks cool. This is probably one of the most important things I bring into the teams that I work with. Just getting us to agree how we're going to decide where to put our time and our money.
Mm-hmm. Great.
But I'll stop talking so much. I want you all to have time if you want to ask questions. So,
okay. All right, we'll cruise through these next two. So the next pattern is innovating with everyone, and I'll go back to the anatomy because for some reason I'm liking that analogy. But if, again, you have to build muscle by doing it every day, if you only ever worked your bicep, you'd look like a pretty funky human, right? Maybe just your right bicep. It could be heavier this side, clothes could fit weird. And so this idea is it doesn't work organizationally if there's just one group that's innovating every day over time.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that, JoAnn, and what that means to innovate with everyone and how you did on the data center.
Yeah, think about it. How many times has somebody technical or scientific invented something, and then they hand it to the sales team and the marketing team, and they're like, I don't know how to price this. I don't know what this is. I don't know who to sell it to. Finance doesn't know how to, monetize it. Supply chain doesn't know how to give us the widgets and whatnots at scale to build this thing. Like, everybody in your company is an innovator if you want to be an innovative company. And that's something I think in the early days with Bill Gates, startup phase, certainly, but it's one of the things I admire about Satya Nadella is he's really figured out how to do that in a company of 200,000 full-time employees with another 150,000 contract employees. I'm not just like, woohoo, Microsoft. I'm telling you, everybody has the option to show up as an innovator. And if you don't, that's fine. But everybody is aware of the fact that through the life cycle of innovation, they have a role to play.
And I think even in today's landscape, right, there's also this perception that to be an innovator, you have to be this uber creative person. And there's these designers and these really cool people who wear fancy shoes, and you're like, those are the innovators. And when you think about AI, we've all heard AI probably 100 times today, that's a creativity tool at the end of the day. So it's really enabling more people to be creative, to be innovators, and to just follow a process. So much of innovation is in the process. And so I think the reality of everybody becoming an innovator is more real today than it's ever been because of the tools and technologies we all have at our disposal.
And that kind of blurs into the fourth pattern. All of these things are intermingled. Like, we had to break them up to explain them, but they're not a la carte. This is all necessary ingredients. This is innovating more than technology. And I use a paperclip just to tick off my fellow engineers. If a paperclip is the technology that solves the problem, use a paperclip. But it's to remind us about including marketing and sales and finance and supply chain and customers. All of these stakeholders need to be brought in, and then you need to actually innovate those systems. You can't think about Microsoft transition. At one point, we had manufacturing facilities stamping out CDs, and we shipped our software. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, it took time, you could just use our software on the cloud, and it's constantly updating, and now this whole part of our business went away. Have we somehow tried to make these things coexist? It would have been doomed, right? But that's exactly what a lot of companies do. They know the thing they need to transition to. It doesn't fit the HR structures, the finance structures, any of the profit model, but they hold on for dear life, and then they wonder why they die. So don't do that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes we see working across different organizations is they're building technology solutions for technology's sake. And they'll come to us and, hey, Twistin, can you help us build this thing? And our first question is usually, well, why are you building this in the first place? What problems is it solving? Who are you building it for? And usually that process uncovers a lot of interesting dialogue and context, but it's well, because we had to move, right? We had to do this AI solution. We had to build this IoT product. We had to design this thing. And it's time out. If you just took a little bit more time to understand the problem you're trying to solve and who you're trying to solve it, maybe the solution's a paperclip and not a custom AI algorithm.
And there's interesting science to back this up, by the way. Dr. Gary Pisano wrote a fabulous book called Creative Construction. Again, you can go read it. I highly recommend it. But we've taken part of what he constructed, this grid, this 2x2, and we've incorporated it into a bigger framework in our book. The key here is everybody's focusing on the x-axis, technology change to radical innovation. About 90% of the innovation budgets go into the x-axis. So I have the jet engines as an example, right? We had prop planes, and then we had jet engines. Still a plane, still flying, it's just technology. The y-axis is business change, all of those structures we just talked about. It gets about 10% of the investment. If you look back, and I talked to Dr. Pisano about this, I was like, yeah, over the last 100 years, almost all the value's been created in the business change, right? He's like, JoAnn, the last forever. He's like, think about us switching from bartering to gold-based money to digital money. He's like, all of those things had all of these systems behind them that made it possible. And so you've got this disconnect of 90% of the investment, 10% of the value is from tech. 10% of the investment, 90% of the value is from business. So one of the things I always do is what Taryn just said. Why are we building something? Are you sure we don't need a paperclip, but we just need to get it to more people? A lot of it is the business side work.
So what's an example of business change? What do we mean by that? So Uber's a great example. The technology that they're using for Uber, maybe there was a few innovations, but by and large, mobile app, technology that's readily available, what they changed was the whole system, was the whole business model of how you get from place A to place B. And that was disruptive innovation. And you think of the impacts that right? Uber has, and you can look, Lyft, everything. So when you think about innovating, they innovated at the business level, and they leveraged technology that was, for the most part, pre-existing today. They just repurposed it and used it in a different way to drive a tremendous amount of value.
Yep.
And then there's the fourth quadrant.
Oh, yeah, I almost forgot.
Yeah, the most important.
I take it for granted because that's where I live. I'm a glutton for punishment. So the data center of the future is just one of the times in my 25 years that I said, you know, we do need tech change. What we've been doing 20 years ago, look how much technology that we support has changed. So obviously the technology behind it needs to change. But we also need business change. So from day one of our project, we aimed for that upper quadrant. And the neat thing about that is Google is a beautiful example of what happens when you get it right. Google came out, like back in the day, you didn't really use search engines. They weren't really great. People built web portals. They did the searching for you. They put the stuff on a portal. You went to the portal, and there were ads in the portal. Google said, we're going to create PageRank. Now anybody can search. So there's your tech change. And they said, we're going to create AdWords and pay-per-click. That's a business change. Tech was there to do it. They just applied it. And what that did was, while I'm searching, I get relevant ads. All of a sudden, the return on investments for ads went out, went off the chart. And then that fed more searches because now vendors are getting more stuff. That feedback cycle, they built a moat so quickly from launch to like 1 year out. Nobody has touched it in 20 years. So that's the power of the architectural quadrant, which that word architectural is meant to convey like structural upheaval, enabled through technology.
And this is an example of one of those great tools and frameworks you can start using within your organization to start innovating every day with everyone. And it's just common language. When JoAnn and I are collaborating, she can say, oh, I love that idea, but is it more in the radical quadrant and we're trying to be in the disruptive quadrant? And you understand what that is. And oh, yeah, you're right. So how would we shift it from radical to disruptive? What would need to change? What would need to be different? And it just enables you to think more freely, collaborate more effectively, and really drive higher value ideas. So again, easy tool, simple framework that you can all bring back to just drive discussion and hopefully new insights that lead to new changes. Yeah. Okay, we're about wrapping up. This is the final slide, and JoAnn will take us home, but when we really reflected and took a step back, and as we were talking, we recognized there is one underlying thing, a big thing, that is needed to make all of this work, to make the 4 patterns effective, and that is trust.
And so Taryn asked me for the one-word summary of what you need to learn to innovate every day over the years with everyone and more than technology, and that's trust. Like, my organization needs to trust that I'm going to do something. They're going to trust that the thing I do is going to be valuable. There's a lot of like betting in the beginning days, right? Like, they're putting their faith in you. The good thing is, when you get these systems and these tools running and you do it every day and you do it over the years and you do it with everyone, trust isn't some magical thing. It just evolves. You're forming the expectations and the relationships that give trust. And as your trust and credibility grows, you get bigger and bigger budgets. You get more and more leeway. Maybe it lets you stretch out of radical into architectural. Like, that's day one of my career. I had a really crazy mentor, and he just trusted me blindly. We went to the same alma mater. It worked. But since that point, it's through my procedures, it's through the practices that me and Dean and the 40 other contributors in this book all point back to. people trust me, they trust my team, they trust my process, and we deliver.
Great.
Okay, so we're gonna take questions and answers, and I think we have like 10 minutes now. We'll be over there at the book signing at 1. So if you don't get to ask us a question, you can come find us. And we've got 2 people with microphones, I think, or one microphone. That's Brad. And we'll talk about anything you want. Ask. If I can't answer it, I'll just say I can't answer it.
Yeah, I think JoAnn, before we open up into questions, there is something we skipped over a little bit, and that's this Regenerous Labs logo on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And I think just for context, and we'll again open this up for questions, and we'll be over there to answer your questions of Microsoft, Twist Think, Regenerous Labs, what the heck is that? So maybe just a brief overview.
So in a giant grant of trust, I approached 3 of my longtime innovation partners. Twist Think's one of them. There's this group called White Rhino, and there's another group called Abacus. I have innovated with these partners for 10 to 20 years. The minimum is 10. And I'm at a point in life, I wrote a book, I'm getting older, I'm like, I just kind of want to play in that architectural land, and I just delivered the plan for the Regenerous Datacenter of the future. And they got time to get that out in the world. I was like, I really want to just form a safe space for me and my favorite collaborative partners to do what we do at the peak level. So they boldly signed up for this, and we're doing that. And it's really an us thing, it's an invitation only thing, but in the course of it, we're also offering ways to keep ourselves primed. We're offering ways for people to engage with us. So we can talk about that over at the book signing. We got information we can give if anybody is interested in taking the practices of the book and learning them through practice. All right.
All right.
Anybody questions? Anybody want to call bullshit? It's magic, damn it. I need a genius and lightning. No?
Over here. Brad's a runner, but he's moving pretty slow right now, so thanks for bearing with us.
Hi, I'm Mandy Bray. How did you earn trust at an individual and an organizational level to tell these stories in the book?
So that's an awesome question, and that is all Dean. I mean, we were both Microsoft. We say in the intro of the book, like, these interviews couldn't have happened by an academic or a consultant. We sat down, like, we interviewed Phil Spencer, the CEO of gaming. And he just told us stories and like showed us stuff. And, you know, we had a rapport and everything, but Dean's 20 years in the company, his network was he's trusted. Everybody we approached knew we weren't gonna trash them or Microsoft, even the failures. Like, we handle the failures as learning, but we call them out, you know?
I'll pile on to that. Actually, something JoAnn said to me on the drive over yesterday, and it started off with, you know, Nike kind of had it all figured out. And I'm like, oh, where's she going with this? And then the follow-up was, just do it. And I think the notion was results don't lie. And if you can demonstrate at a small scale to start that you can deliver results, it starts building credibility, it starts building trust. I mean, you can't bypass all the other layers of trust. You got to be a good person. You got to be respectful. But I think that just go do it. Demonstrate that you're capable starts building trust in small ways as appropriate, and then you build upon that.
Show, don't tell.
Can you just talk a little bit about how your process accounts for this just severe rate of change and volume of changes coming in technology? How do you keep aware of it? You know, how do you keep the experts in-house? There's constant change there. What are the methods and parts of your process to keep that in the innovation?
I wish it was something fancy, but it's really everybody taking responsibility for growth and learning. Like, growth mindset is this super buzzy thing. I call it intentional discovery. I can't learn everything from everyone. So there's two parts to it. Like, I can't know everything. So I always have partners. And I always partner with people that are also going out learning constantly. But there's an intention to it. If I'm trying to solve a global problem, I can't just know about how things work in the US. I need knowledge from all over the world. Otherwise, my solution's going to fail when it moves, right? So it really is about surrounding yourself with people that you're working the same way, you can communicate with one another through words and pictures and et cetera, but everybody is committed to curiosity and exploration with intention, right? So that you have good knowledge in the room. And then we also afford time for just random stuff because you just never know what you're going to learn from somebody, right? So we come to conferences, et cetera, et cetera. But it really is, you know, what I learned in kindergarten. Yeah. Be curious, ask questions, share.
I'm into analogies today, apparently, but I think it's in line with what JoAnn said, but typically during college football season, I know who the top 10 teams are, and it's very rarely Michigan State, which is my alma mater, but that's a side note. And the only reason why I know that is because I read about it, and I watch the replays, and I see who's talking, and I listen to it. That is no different than learning about what's the latest technologies and what's happening. And so when I, in the fall, come into work and I see my buddy like, oh my gosh, did you see that Clemson-Alabama game? And we talk about it. That's no different than me walking into JoAnn and be like, hey, JoAnn, I read this article on AI and how they're disrupting nutrition. Did you hear about that? It's the same
and
thing.
I'm usually like, no, tell me.
Here, I'll forward it to you. But it's the same exact concept, and it connects to the innovating every day with everyone. You have to just stay curious, and you have to just absorb, and before you know it, you start talking about Clemson and Alabama, or AI and nutrition.
Oh, I thought that was somebody asking a question. I'm like, what? I have an article on my website, which if you go to the book, it'll send you to me. I wrote an article about antenna and just training your innovator's antenna and combining it to amplify signals with other people. And that's a really cool part when you do continuous learning and intentional discovery is think about a signal. I'm receiving signals all the time, but if I'm tuning my antenna in different ways, I'm going to pick up finer and finer signals. And then if I stand next to somebody with different antenna, she's picking up signals, I'm picking up signals, now we're combining our signals. You do that with your company. That's how, like, I have a track record, and this is just fact, I'll humble brag, but it's just fact. I have somehow been 3 to 5 years ahead of every market I've entered. That can sometimes be a curse because people are like, who are you? What are you? But it's not because I'm a genius. I did not go to Ivy League. I didn't ace the SATs, if they even take those anymore. My brothers will tell you that they're smarter than me, like the whole works. But I have a lot of antenna. If you go to that blog, you'll see all the stuff I'm curious about, and then I love meeting other curious people. And so that's what I've done, whether it was in theater or anything. I've just always surrounded myself with lots of curious people, and that has kept me ahead of the curve for 25 years.
All right, one last question over here. It's not, but we can hear you, and we'll re-articulate.
It's on now. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
I really enjoyed the talk. Can you speak something about internal innovation versus external innovation, or organic versus inorganic innovation?
Do you want to define them at all? Because I get internal, external. What about inorganic, organic?
I'm ex-corporate. I've got a different role now. I would say to protect the innocent, I won't say where, but there was an awful lot of turn towards external innovation, and the effect that that had on the internal innovation and the project teams and all this sort of curiosity and collaboration and excitement, yes, internal, but then when the innovation started to come in from external, all that sort of got weird. And so I'm just curious, from your perspective at Microsoft, how do you handle that? How do you deal with it? How do you make it less weird and more collaborative?
Yeah, it's a struggle.
VUCA.
Yeah, and it's that third line of the Diesel quote, right? Like, we're humans. We have egos, we have biases, we're worried about our paychecks. Like, I'm not going to say it's easy, but I will say when it comes from the C-suite that, hey, we've got $1 billion Microsoft research arm that is committed to AI and has been developing AI for 35 years. We're going to give $1 billion to OpenAI, and they're going to develop. Let's see what happens. And it wasn't pitted as a competition. It was like, look, they can move faster and do things that we can't do because we're a big thing. But we're going to work together to make sure when and if they ever deliver their big thing, we got all the structures in place to roll it out. And that mindset, it's not universal at all. I could tell you stories. I won't.
That's it for happy hour.
Yes, that's at happy hour. But like Office, think about the Microsoft Office product. It's almost as old as Microsoft. The leader of that product said to her staff, no new features. We're done 5 years ago, well before OpenAI hit the market. She's like, no new features. We're getting ready. We're gonna be the first ones to get on this AI curve, even though we're the oldest product. We're gonna unlock the features we've already built. They delivered Designer in PowerPoint, which is this great, drop your picture in your text and it makes a pretty slide for you. Where was that all my life? It made these slides. But she did that knowing we're investing in AI. At some point, it's going to get smarter, and it's going to be more helpful. We can spell check now. Maybe sometime soon we'll be able to write paragraphs. And so literally within months of OpenAI delivering the new powerful GPTs, Office embedded them. They beat like every other product other than Bing out into the market, and the reason was Bing was the one creating the infrastructure for it. So it has to come from the C-suite when you're doing internal, external. Organic, inorganic is more honestly like a division of labor. I won't go too far into it, but when we look across all the spectrum of people, some people are closer to the day-to-day operations. They're going to see opportunities that I'm not going to see, right? I need to talk to them when I'm thinking about 5, 10, 15 years from now. So mine is like inorganic innovation. It's purposeful. It's, long-term. But they're innovating every day, and that's more of the incremental iterative. We had it on the Pisano chart. It was in black. It was called routine. And he goes into great depth to say, look, we're not saying that's cheap or worthless or anything. It's super critical. Like, that's table stakes. So did that answer the question?
Great. Yeah.
Trust goes a long way.
All right.
There's a great...
You did tell me to cut you off before you started talking too much. So I'm just trying to be a good
But there's one
support.
great quote in the book from the head of M365 Design. Oh, you just made me miss
I'm
it.
sorry.
It was about trust. Oh, he points out at the end of the Office chapter, he's like, I really think our cultural transformation happened 5 to 7 years ago, and this moment is just the proof in the pudding. And there you go, trust.
All right. And as we mentioned, she could keep going, and she's really good at it. So we're going to be over at the book signing at 1 o'clock. If anybody has any follow-up questions, want to talk one-on-one, learn more about the book, learn more about Regen Labs, learn more about Twist Think, we'll both be there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.